Hi, friends. Welcome to Wicked Wit. I'm your host, Randy Joe, and this is episode 14. Thank you for tuning in this week. I hope that everybody is having a safe and fun summer so far. It is very hard to believe that July is basically over. I don't have very much at the top of this week's episode, just the normal housekeeping per usual. So please download, rate, review, and subscribe wherever you listen. Any support really helps the show out. This week, I am covering the case of Laurie Show, and this is actually a murder that took place in my hometown. So I did grow up knowing probably too much at such a young age, just from hearing updates on the case from the local news and seeing articles in the newspapers. My grandparents, they also had a copy of the book entitled Overkill by author Lynn Riddle, and I did use that as one of my sources this week. But I remember reading that book at a very young age. I had to kind of sneak it away from my grandparents. I would read it while my grandmother was napping on the couch and my grandfather was kind of tinkering outside, or my ass would be in trouble. I also remember there being an insert in the book, like the actual physical copy, with pictures of the crime scene, and my grandmother, she would be pissed anytime she saw the book out just because she knew that I was fascinated by the case, but I guess she was trying to protect me at such a young age, but here we are. I have a true crime podcast. So sources that I use this week are Overkill by Lynn Riddle, Murderpedia.org, co.lancaster.pa.us, and Lancaster Online. So I'm going to go ahead and just say it. It's Lancaster. I've heard so many people say Lancaster. I'm not gonna harp on this for too long, but we know when you're not from here. But I did I've I did grow up in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. I have been here my entire life. So, yeah. Laurie Show was born on January 27th, 1975, to Hazel and John Show in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. Hazel had a difficult birth with Laurie. When she went into labor, she was actually sick with the flu, but Laurie's umbilical cord was also tied in two separate knots and wrapped around her neck three times. So, because of being positive with the flu, Hazel wasn't able to hold her newborn for the first 24 hours of her life, which would be soul crushing. The only thing that you're worried about as a new mama is being with that baby that you just spent the last 9 months growing, and you want to count their toes, their fingers, just looking into their eyes. I would have been heartbroken. But other than the scary umbilical cord stuff and Hazel having the flu, Lori was a happy, healthy baby. When Lori was about 2, John and Hazel divorced, and although the two had tried to reconcile, they ultimately decided that divorce was the better option for them. But Lori was very close with both of her parents, and her dad was a very present father, so that's great. I mean, he still did all the dad things, and he was very present in her life. Hazel worked as a nurse's aide at the local hospital, and when Lori was 16 years old, Hazel had decided it was time for the two of them to downsize. The home that Lori grew up in was too big for the two of them, and Hazel wanted something without yard maintenance, so the two of them moved to an apartment in the Oaks condominium complex. When Lori was a sophomore at Conestoga Valley High School, she befriended a girl named Rachel Winesicle, who lived in the apartment complex that was across the street from Lori's complex. Rachel was a pretty popular girl, and she kind of showed Lori the ropes and introduced her to some of her friends. Two of those friends being Lisa Michelle Lambert and Lawrence Butch Yunkin, whose last name is strangely close to my maiden name, which gives me the ick. But so Butch and Lisa Michelle Lambert, They were a couple and a few years older than Laurie, and they were not in high school. So I'm going to give you a little bit of a background on Lisa Michelle Lambert. As I said, she was 2 years older than Laurie, and she grew up in a very religious household. Lisa Michelle had younger siblings and really took care of them. She was made to grow up fast when her mother had a stillbirth, and she kind of took care of the family while her mother grieved. And this happened not only once, but twice. So she was really pushed into a mother hen role. When Lisa Michelle was 16, she took her brother to the local pool, and this is where she met 17-year-old Lawrence Butch Yunkin. So, just a side note here, throughout this case, I am going to refer to him by his nickname Butch because Lawrence is my stepdad's name, and I don't even call him Lawrence or Larry. I call him Duke. So, I'm going to be referring to Lawrence as Butch. And how Lawrence had gotten this nickname is a mystery. It doesn't even make sense, but I'm sure it was the 90s of it all, and Butch's appearance really reminds me of a Butch. So he was a lifeguard at the pool, and he was super tan. He had a bleach blonde mullet, and when Lisa Michelle saw him, she immediately had like those little tiny hearts in her eyes that like you would see on like Looney Tunes. I don't know. And so did Butch. So they were smitten kittens when they first saw each other. The two started dating, and it wasn't long until Butch became controlling, of course. So instead of calling his girlfriend Lisa, which was her first name, her given name, and what she went by her entire life, he decided that he liked the name Michelle better. So that's what she started going by. And I hate to do it, but this is what I'm going to refer to her as well, just because there's so many people in this case, so I'm just going to be referring to Lisa as Michelle. And Butch also wanted her to look like Barbie, which is so fucking disgusting. Michelle had a super long, beautiful dark hair and dyed it bleach blonde for him. So, of course, after Butch completely changes everything he didn't like about Michelle, he has no other choice but to soon follow with abuse. One night, after the couple went on a date, Butch went to drop Michelle off at her parents' house and ended up beating and raping her. And afterwards, he apologized and he promised to marry her because she had come from a religious background. But of course, Butch denies the rape and the abuse allegations. Ultimately, Michelle was very close to Butch's family, and when her grades started to plummet and she dropped out of high school, her parents had kicked her out and she moved into the Yunkin home. So after Butch had graduated high school, the couple then moved into their own place, and that's when the abuse and the control had gotten worse. Michelle wasn't allowed to go out with friends, and if she did, Butch would follow her. And at one point, he beat her up so badly that she was hospitalized. Butch had told the doctors and nurses at the hospital that she was in a car accident and refused to leave her side, even when she had to get x rays. So I'm sure he didn't want to leave her side in fear of what she would tell doctors and nurses and, you know, them finding out the truth of why she was really there. Michelle's parents did try to intervene to get her away from the abuse she was experiencing, but Michelle had refused due to fear of being killed because, of course, Butch is a terrible fucking person and he has threatened to kill her before. So, after about 2 years of dating, in the summer of 1991, the most beautiful baby girl was born named Randy Joe. This is when Michelle also broke things off with Butch and he moved back into his parents' home. And around this time, Laurie was also introduced to the two. And soon after the breakup, Butch and Laurie started hanging out. He was 20, she was 16, which I've said it before, I'll say it again. You have no business of knowing a 16-year-old when you're 20, but you're gross, Butch. The two had only gone on a few dates, and this literally only lasts a week because Butch and Michelle had decided to get back together. So Butch, he had ended things with Laurie, and he and Michelle had moved back in together. And Laurie, she's completely cool with it. She doesn't care. She's young and beautiful, and it's summertime. Why get hung up on a stupid boy that's older than you? Like, he doesn't even matter. So Laurie, she moves on with her dating life and begins dating Brad Heisler. And although Laurie seemed to be happy with her new relationship, she did end up confiding in her mother, Hazel, and told her that Butch had raped her one night after they went on a date. I mean, this this like fling of a relationship only lasted a week, and he had already raped her. Like, what kind of fucking sick person? So Hazel is obviously furious, which is completely understandable, and she tells Laurie that they're going to press charges, but Laurie refused. She's like, I want to put this behind me. I want to move on with her life. But one person could not put it behind her and move on with her life, and that was Michelle. So Michelle would call the show home constantly and scream obscenities into the phone, which got so bad at one point that Laurie and Hazel would take the phone off the hook at night just to be able to sleep. Michelle also went into the clothing store that Laurie worked at and screamed, "You fucked my boyfriend," and slut at Laurie, not only in front of customers shopping at the store, but also in front of Laurie's boss. Like, that is so ugh. It's so embarrassing and it just ugh. So these kinds of incidents, they would happen anytime Michelle would see Laurie in public. She would shove Laurie, she would call her terrible names, swear at her, scream in her face. So one day, Laurie and her dad, John, were at the mall and Michelle saw them. So of course she decides to fucking walk up to them and lose her mind. So she walks up to John and she tells him that his daughter had sex with her boyfriend, which is just fucking weird. Like, why would you do that? But this isn't the first time that Michelle had harassed Laurie in front of her parents. One time, Michelle saw Laurie and Hazel at a market and told Hazel, "Your daughter fucked my boyfriend." And this happened while they were with a good friend of Hazel's and the friend's 4-year-old. What what would possess you to do that? Ah, she doesn't stop there though. Another time while Lori was at the mall, Michelle was there too. And at this point, I truly believe she is stalking her. She shoved her up against the window and pulled her hair, and of course, is insulting her up and down, left and right, like any which way she can. So, a few weeks after that incident, John and Lori are at the mall again. Here comes Michelle on a rampage. So Lori was scared, and it was reported that it was getting to the point that she would be visibly shaken, crying and panicking anytime she would see Michelle or Butch out in public. And Michelle walked right up to John and got in his face and started screaming. Like, this girl has really lost her damn mind. I can't believe that multiple people have witnessed things like this and no one stepped in to diffuse this situation. I don't know. Maybe someone did, but it wasn't reported on. So I wouldn't be able to stand there and see something like that in public without, you know, stepping in and saying, this isn't right. In November of 1991, Michelle had seen Lori in public again, and she grabs her by her hair. She screams, "You ruined my life," and she beats the shit out of her. And Hazel, at this point, she's so done. And she goes to the police to file a simple assault charge against Michelle. And John, Hazel, and Lori's boyfriend, Brad, had come up with a schedule to kind of make sure that Laurie's never alone. Brad takes her to and from school, and her parents take her to work and pick her up from work. So this brings us to Thursday, December 19th, 1991. Hazel had received a phone call from Laurie's guidance counselor asking her to meet the following morning to discuss Laurie's behavior. Hazel agrees, and when she gets home from work that day, she confronts Laurie about the phone call, but Laurie swears up and down that she has no idea what it could be about. So Hazel's like, okay, whatever. You're probably lying, or, it might have something to do with, the things that are going on. You're a teenager. Life can be hard. So Hazel goes to the school the following morning, December 20th, 1991, at 7 a.m. And as she's leaving her apartment, she checks on Laurie, who was getting ready for school and for Brad to pick her up. Hazel had arrived at the meeting, but the guidance counselor wasn't there yet. And the longer she waited, the more pissed she got because the guidance counselor was a no-show. So she's real pissed at this point, and she leaves the school to go back home. As she gets back into her apartment complex, her neighbor meets her out front and asks her if everything is okay. Hazel's like, yeah, why? And the neighbor says, well, I heard loud noises and a lot of commotion coming from your apartment. Not too sure what's going on up there, but it's been loud and it's early. So Hazel, she runs up to her and Laurie's apartment to find it a mess. She finds her daughter on the floor, covered in blood, with a rope around her neck. Laurie's eyes were open and her arms were jerking beside her body, and she was making a noise. Hazel had screamed for the neighbor to call 911 and rushed to her daughter's side to untie the rope around her neck. And as she did, Laurie's head fell back, revealing a deep slit in her neck, gushing blood. Hazel was trying to stop the bleeding when she came to the realization that she was actually lured out of the house so someone could do this to her baby girl. As Hazel is cradling Laurie, she says, I am so sorry. It was a setup. Who did this to you? And Laurie responds in a whisper, Michelle did it. I love you. And Hazel responds, I love you. Daddy loves you. God will take care of you. Laurie mouthed love you and died in her mother's arms as police and paramedics rushed into the Show apartment and pronounced Laurie dead. Heartbreaking. Like, almost got, you know, pretty emotional there. So at this point, police are on the hunt for Lisa Michelle Lambert and Lawrence Yunkin, and they're looking at all of the usual places that the two typically hang out. They, of course, go to the mall. They go to Butch's work, and they also go to Butch's mom's work, which is a bowling alley that the two would frequent quite a bit. And around 10 p.m. that night, police had received a phone call from an employee at the bowling alley saying that the two had just walked in. So police arrive at the bowling alley and find the couple playing pool. The first thing that police notice is that Michelle was pregnant. Yep, that's right. These two winners had decided to procreate. And Michelle, at this point, is about 6 months pregnant. And this is the reason why the two broke up in the first place, because she found out she was pregnant. And Laurie was well aware of the pregnancy, and that's why she was so cool with her and Butch ending things. She wanted no parts of that situation. So police asked the two to come to the police station, but they also notice a large scratch on their friend's face as well. The friend that they were with is 17-year-old Tabitha Buck, and she goes by Tabby. Noticing the scratch, the police are like, well, we want to talk to you too, Tabby. And because of Tabby being a minor and only 17, she does need a parent with her. So she goes, she gets her mom, and at 11:15 p.m., Tabby and her mother walk into the police department and are ready for questioning. So detectives, they tell Tabby, they're like, fill us in on your entire day. Don't leave a single detail out. And this is what she had told police. Butch and Michelle picked her up around 6:20 a.m. to take her to school, but first they had to stop at Kmart. Kmart. I miss Kmart kind of. I don't know. Butch, he drops the girls off at Kmart and he runs to McDonald's, returning about 10 minutes later to pick them up. The girls get in the car, and as they're driving off, Michelle realizes that she forgot her purse at Kmart, so they go back. And as they're heading back to Kmart, Butch realizes that his car is acting up. So he decides to pull over in a different McDonald's parking lot and tries to figure out what's going on. I didn't know there were so many McDonald's so close to each other, but I think I know of the Kmart that they're talking about. I don't know. I was young, so who knows. But and then for some reason, I don't know why she felt this was relevant to the story, but she said that the key broke off into the lock. And then all of a sudden, like this story is fucking nuts. But all of a sudden, two Puerto Rican girls, they appear out of nowhere and they start flirting with Butch. This pisses Michelle off, obviously. So she starts calling them sluts and whores. And one of the girls punched Michelle in the face. And Tabby says, she's pregnant, you can't hit her. And then Tabby gets punched. But she thinks that the girl that had punched her had keys or something in her fist, and that's how she got the scratch. So Puerto Rican girls leave, I guess. I don't know. They couldn't find any information on that. But they end up fixing the car and they leave McDonald's. They're on the way to school. But then they get lost. Lancaster's not that big. It's really not. I mean, I don't know. But she doesn't get to school until around 9 a.m. She is obviously late. So she has to go to the attendance office. And the lady at the desk, she asks her, what happened to your face? And she responds with, some Mexican girl scratched me. Okay, girl, what the fuck? Are they Mexican or Puerto Rican? Like, do you know that there's a difference? It's fucking. So at this point, detectives hear everything they want to hear from Tabby, and they dismiss her and her mom around 2 a.m. But before Tabby and her mother leave, detectives tell Tabby that Laurie Show was dead. And upon hearing the news, Tabby, she crumbles into her mom and starts sobbing. So now it's Butch's turn for questioning. He tells the same story, not verbatim, but the base is the same except for the Puerto Rican girls. He says that they started calling Michelle names and they hit Tabby. So they're like, all right, okay, guys. Then it's Michelle's turn to tell her side of the story, and she is telling it in so much detail, way too much detail. Still the same base of Tabby and Butch's story, but again, way too detailed. This time, though, the Puerto Rican girls called Tabby a whore and whistled at Butch. So the police are obviously calling bullshit. This story is too outlandish to believe. So they start asking Michelle questions. They're like, hey, did you go to Laurie's house that morning? And she says, no, I've never been to Laurie's house. Then she changes her story and says, okay, I was there, but I stayed downstairs. Tabby went upstairs. I saw nothing. Then she changes her story again and says she saw Tabby attack Laurie but didn't help her. Then one more fucking time, she changes her story again. So she says, actually, Tabby and I did go to Laurie's, but I just wanted to talk to her, like maybe humiliate her and cut her hair or something. But Tabby had lost it and just started stabbing her. Butch wasn't there. Like, this bitch is so fucking dumb, I swear. So the detectives, they tell Michelle that Laurie had died, and she acts shocked, of course. So detectives now go back to Butch and they start questioning him, but they change things up a little bit and they start by telling him that Laurie has passed away and he acts shocked too. So the detectives, they try a different tactic to try to get the truth from Butch, and they lied to him, saying that one of the girls pinned everything on him, which in turn made Butch give them all the information that they were looking for. This is Butch's side of the story. So, the night before the murder, Michelle had asked Butch to take her to Kmart. So he does, but doesn't go into the store with her. And when she comes out with a bag, she hops in the car. She tells him, go to Tabby's house. So he does. And when they get there, she hops out of the car, runs into Tabby's. While she's inside Tabby's house, Butch looks in the Kmart bag and sees that Michelle had purchased white nylon rope and a black ski mask. So they go home, it's business as usual, and the next morning they go pick up Tabby. Butch then drove them to Laurie's house. Michelle tells him, go to McDonald's, come back in about 30 minutes. So he does, and when he gets back into the apartment complex, he sees the girls kneeling by the bushes outside. The two run to the car, get in, and he asks what happened. But they're tight-lipped. They're not saying anything. A few minutes go by, and Tabby out of nowhere yells, that bitch scratched me. And then Michelle had noticed a cut on her lip from where Laurie must have kicked her. And he says he looked down, and Michelle's hands were covered in blood, which then tells detectives that the girls dumped their clothes in a pink bag that's in a dumpster near Butch and Michelle's home. He also tells detectives that the murder weapon was thrown in a nearby river. So detectives, they call the dumpster company and they're like, hold all of your trucks and all of your pickups. They go to look for the bag of clothes. They end up finding it before the trash was picked up. Thank God. And they also find the kitchen knife that was used to kill Laurie. So at this point, the police, they go to the home of Michelle and Butch, and the inside is horrendous. It's littered in trash. There's cat and chinchilla shit everywhere. The place smells terrible. So the police, they want to arrest Michelle and Butch, but they have to wait on Laurie's autopsy results. So in the state of Pennsylvania, police have to charge for murder within 6 hours of arrest, or they have to let the suspects go. But luckily for police, these two dipshits had warrants. Butch had a warrant for a noise violation, and Michelle had a warrant for the simple assault charge against Laurie. So the East Lampeter Police Department is able to place the two under arrest. When the autopsy report does come back, it is found that the cause of death was due to her neck being slit and a fatal stab wound on her back that had punctured a lung. Neighbors were questioned at this point, and they confirm that they did see two people around the same height in dark clothing quickly walking away from the apartment around the time on the day of the murder. So, police, they now have enough evidence to charge all three of these dipshits with Laurie's murder. And they are all tried separately, starting with Michelle. In March 1992, she gives birth to a baby girl in prison. And although Butch begged to be present for the birth, he was denied. Why would you think that they would let you do that? I don't understand. I don't know what goes through people's heads. But Michelle's parents, they're granted custody of the baby. Butch was offered a plea deal if he testifies against Michelle and Tabby. They say, if you testify, you'll only receive 3 years. He accepts. I mean, at this point, he would be an idiot not to. So Michelle's trial starts in July of 1992, and she opted to waive a jury trial. So it's all on the judge. The judge has to make the decision, and Butch does end up testifying against her and tells a story that he told police. But he does elaborate this time and says when the group got back to Michelle and Butch's house, the girls were cleaning up and Butch, he's pressing them. He wants to know what happened. So Michelle tells him that during the fight, Laurie accidentally got stabbed and they heard a hissing noise after she was stabbed, which was probably her lung being punctured. And the two had realized that she was bleeding out, so they had no choice but to put her out of her misery. So they decided to slit her throat. Like, how fucking stupid. It, she's not an animal. You could have saved her if this is the truth, which clearly it's not. Yeah, you just have to be a fucking idiot to believe these dumbasses. So, Butch, he did admit to helping come up with the story as well as disposal of the evidence. And while on stand, Michelle tells the judge that the three of them went to Laurie's that day just to talk to her, but Tabby had lost it. So she's sticking with that story. But she changes it up a little bit. She says she got scared and ran out of the apartment as Butch was coming into the apartment. So she blames Butch and Tabby. So this leads the prosecution to bring up what they referred to as the 29 questions. So Butch and Michelle, while they were awaiting trial, they wrote each other back and forth quite a bit. And in one letter to Butch from Michelle, she tells him, I need you to answer these questions for me to take the fall for you. I guess she was initially going to take responsibility for Laurie's murder because they thought that she would get a lesser sentence because of being a woman and having to, I don't know, give birth in prison. I'm not sure. I don't know what they thought was going to happen. But she wrote to him, quote, I guess I won't tell on you, but please answer these questions honestly. There are some things I need to know if I'm supposed to take the blame for what you did, end quote. She's like, write down your answers, send them back. Some of the questions were like normal shit, stupid shit, like, do you promise to love me forever? And just like little high school shit. This isn't high school class. You're on trial for murder. But the damning questions were as follows. She said, do you remember seeing Laurie dead? His response, yes, I remember seeing her dead. Question 2. Should I still cover up for you? Should I still cover up that you helped Tabby kill Laurie? His response, yes, I'm positive. Third question, and this is kind of like on the lines of like, like the little high school bullshit, but it is a little damning. Will you promise to love me if I lie for you? His response, always and forever. So he is given the letters while he's on stand, and he immediately says that these letters are tampered with. Butch states that the questions in the letters were actually about the couple's friend, Tressa, that had overdosed. But it was ultimately proven that the letters were not tampered with. So Butch did say the initial plan was to just beat Laurie up, and with the evidence from the letters and Butch admitting to this, his dumbass committed perjury, which meant his plea deal is off the table. He does get a new plea deal, though, 10 to 20 years for third-degree murder, which he happily accepts. So during Michelle's trial, prosecutors do bring up the fact that Laurie did name her killer with speculation that because of the injury, she wouldn't have been able to speak. And the most severe injury to Laurie was just above Laurie's vocal cords. And they brought a high-end doctor in stating that it was possible for her to speak in a whisper especially if she was being held up by her mother. This information and the long history of harassment and stalking, Lisa Michelle Lambert was found guilty of first-degree murder and given a life sentence without the possibility of parole. So now we're going to move on to Tabby. Tabby's trial began in October of 1992, and she was charged as an adult, even though she was 17 at the time of the crime. Her trial lasts 1 week. So, you play stupid games, you win stupid prizes. She states that the murder was carried out by Butch and Michelle, but she did block Laurie from escaping while Michelle slit her throat. Like, these three, they're just blaming each other. Like, oh, I didn't have anything to do with it. It was these two. Or, oh, I didn't have anything to do with it. I just held her down while Michelle slit her throat. Like, get the fuck out of here. So, Tabby is ultimately charged with second-degree murder and given a life sentence without the possibility of parole. It was brought up in the trials at the crime scene. Detectives had noticed that on a closet door near Laurie's body, it looked like the letters T and B were written in blood, which could mean Tabitha and Butch or Tabitha Buck. A friend of Michelle's had also testified that Michelle had approached them and asked them with help to kidnap Laurie, tie her up, and cut her hair. I don't understand what the fascination is with the hair. I just don't get it. The manager from McDonald's did also testify that Butch was indeed there the morning of the murder at the time of the murder, so that was highly disputed as well. So, they're all in jail. In 1997, a judge had reviewed allegations of misconduct from the prosecutor in the case against Michelle. It was discovered that there were about 2 minutes cut from the video of detectives finding the murder weapon in the river. It was also found out that Hazel Show had told prosecutors that she did, in fact, see Butch coming from the apartment complex on the morning of the murder, but was told by prosecutors not to mention that in the trial. Like, why would you not? I just don't understand. And also, some crime scenes were altered, stating that Laurie's body was moved before the photos were taken. There were so many other things that discredited the detectives and prosecution in the case, but these are just like the main big ones. So, the judge ultimately determined Lisa Michelle Lambert to be innocent, and she was released from prison in April 1997. She was released for only 8 months until the ruling was overturned and she was forced to resume her sentence. And while Michelle was in prison, she had won $35,000 in a lawsuit from being raped several times by a correctional officer, and the CO was sentenced to 1 to 3 years. Butch was paroled in 2004 and moved on with his life. I really couldn't find anything about his whereabouts today, just that he's an avid bowler and he's pretty good, I guess. I don't know. Tabitha Buck, she was released in 2019 after 28 years in prison. Since she was a minor when she was charged, it was deemed unconstitutional to charge her with life without the possibility of parole. Hazel is a huge advocate for anti-stalking laws and was able to pass Pennsylvania's first anti-stalking law called Laurie's Law in June of 1993. So that is the case of Laurie Show and the three fucking terrible pieces of shit, human flesh, fucking nasty. Oh my god. I can't even like describe that. I can't put into words how grotesque these three are. Like, really trying to blame each other. And, like, Michelle was so unhinged that she decided, "Oh, the only way that I can deal with this is if Laurie's dead." They fucking dated for a week. Like, I'm sure it was at that point, it probably wasn't even dating, they were just, like, hanging out. And Laurie got raped. This fucking Jesus Christ. People are fucked up. So, alright, well, that is the case of Laurie Show, and I will talk to you guys next week. Bye.